Every so often you cross paths with a person who leaves a chill in your memory long after they've gone. A smile that doesn't touch the eyes, an apology that sounds rehearsed, a presence that's eerily poised and disturbingly calm. We're not talking about the Hannibal Lecters or Tom Ripleys of fiction, but the real-life counterparts who walk among us, blending charm with calculated detachment. They may not lurk behind bars. Instead, they'll lead boardrooms, manage you at work, or manipulate conversations at dinner parties. Clinical psychopathy isn't rare. It affects 1 in every 100 people worldwide. These individuals don't just lie once in a while. They habitually manipulate, show shallow emotions, lack real remorse, and view others as tools. That cold detachment serves them well, whether in prehistoric scavenging or modern corporate strategy. This video digs into the chilling reality behind the stereotype. We'll uncover how psychopathy evolved, why it didn't vanish, and how it might quietly prosper in today's world. Brace yourself. Understanding this isn't just fascinating, it's unsettling. Long before the dawn of recorded history, when human beings were still primitive hunter-gatherers struggling to survive amidst the merciless forces of nature, an intricate and paradoxical aspect of human nature was already taking shape deep within the evolving brain and psyche. An emotional blueprint that balanced between empathy and cold, calculated detachment. In those ancient times, survival was not only a matter of physical strength or agility, but also of complex social dynamics that required cooperation, trust, and emotional bonding among group members to protect against predators, share scarce resources, and nurture offspring. However, alongside this necessity for emotional connection existed another equally potent survival mechanism embedded within certain individuals, a predisposition for emotional detachment, characterized by a lack of empathy, remorse, and fear, which we today identify as psychopathic traits. This duality in human nature, preserved through millions of years of evolution, is deeply rooted in genetics, neurological structure, and social function, and it reveals a complex evolutionary strategy known as frequency-dependent selection, where a small proportion of emotionally detached individuals could exploit the cooperative tendencies of the majority to gain resources, status, and power without the psychological burden of guilt or compassion. Neuroscientifically, this ancient blueprint manifests through distinct brain structures. Notably, the amygdala, responsible for emotional processing, is typically reduced in size or functionally impaired in those exhibiting psychopathic traits, while the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which governs moral reasoning and impulse control, shows weakened connectivity with emotional centers, enabling these individuals to act with ruthless efficiency and manipulative charm. Archaeological evidence further supports this theory, as ancient burial sites and fossil records display signs of deliberate, emotionless violence. Skeletons with precise cranial injuries and mass graves indicating systematic execution rather than chaotic battle, implying that this capacity for cold, calculated aggression was not only present but possibly advantageous in early human groups. Such unemotional brutality allowed certain individuals to navigate the harsh realities of famine, intergroup conflict, and social competition by suppressing natural empathic responses, thereby maximizing their own survival and reproductive success in ways that balanced precariously with the cooperative social fabric. As human societies advanced from scattered bands to complex civilizations, this emotional detachment morphed into new forms. The ruthless warrior gave way to the cunning political strategist, the manipulative leader, and the deceptive social climber who could mask their lack of genuine empathy behind a facade of charm, persuasion, and calculated social interaction. This evolutionary legacy, while often hidden beneath the surface of social life, continues to influence contemporary human behavior, illuminating the darker side of human interaction, where trust can be weaponized and relationships exploited for personal gain. By delving into this intricate interplay of ancient biology, evolutionary pressures, and modern psychological manifestations, we uncover a profound understanding of why human beings are capable of both profound kindness and chilling cruelty, and how this dual nature is a fundamental part of the human condition, shaped over hundreds of thousands of years. This chapter, therefore, embarks on a comprehensive exploration of the prehistoric origins of emotional detachment, bridging the gap between fossilized evidence, brain science, and the evolutionary logic that allowed such traits to persist alongside empathy, ultimately shaping the complex, often contradictory social beings we are today. Psychopathy is not merely a label for cruel or antisocial behavior. It is deeply rooted in neurological and psychological differences that shape how individuals perceive and interact with the world. Research over the last few decades has illuminated the complex brain mechanisms that underlie psychopathic traits, revealing a picture far more intricate than mere bad behavior. One of the key neurological hallmarks of psychopathy lies in the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure nestled deep within the brain's limbic system, primarily responsible for processing emotions such as fear, empathy, and guilt. Functional imaging studies have consistently shown that the amygdala in psychopathic individuals is smaller and less active than in neurotypical people. This hypoactivity translates into a diminished ability to feel fear or distress in response to others' suffering, a critical component that explains why psychopaths can harm others without remorse. But the amygdala is only part of the story. The prefrontal cortex, especially the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, VMPFC, also plays a crucial role. This area governs higher-order functions like decision-making, impulse control, moral reasoning, and the regulation of social behavior. Psychopaths often exhibit reduced connectivity between the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, meaning the brain areas responsible for emotion and judgment do not communicate efficiently. The consequence is a personality that can intellectually understand social norms and consequences, but lacks the emotional wiring to feel compelled to abide by them. Neurologically, this combination fosters a detached, calculating mindset, one that is cold and manipulative rather than emotional or empathetic. Psychopathy's psychological profile, as outlined by Robert Hare's psychopathy checklist, highlights traits such as superficial charm, pathological lying, grandiosity, and shallow affect. These are not just momentary lapses in behavior, but rather consistent, ingrained patterns. The shallow affect refers to the blunted emotional experience that psychopaths endure. They rarely experience genuine sadness, anxiety, or love, instead displaying what looks like emotion on the surface but lacks depth. This emotional flatness is linked directly to the brain's impaired emotional circuits. Additionally, psychopaths tend to have an inflated sense of self-worth and are skilled at manipulating others through charm and deceit. Their ability to feign empathy and build superficial relationships allows them to blend seamlessly into social groups, making them difficult to detect. This combination of neurological deficits and psychological traits explains why psychopathy isn't a simple lack of morals, but rather a fundamental difference in brain function and emotional processing. However, psychopathy isn't simply a neurological defect. Genetics and environment also shape its development. Twin studies suggest that genetic factors contribute about 50 to 60% to psychopathic traits, highlighting a strong hereditary component. Genes related to emotional regulation, impulse control, and stress response, such as MAOA, KOMT, and serotonin transporter genes, play contributory roles. Yet genes alone do not determine destiny. Childhood environment, trauma, neglect, and social conditioning interact with genetic predispositions, influencing whether psychopathic traits fully develop. Early signs can be seen in childhood through callous, unemotional traits which may predict later psychopathy, but the trajectory varies widely depending on environmental factors. This gene-environment interplay suggests psychopathy is best understood not as a fixed disorder, but as a conditional adaptation that may emerge under certain circumstances. The brain's wiring, the psychological profile, and the social context converge to produce a persona capable of cold calculation, manipulation, and emotional detachment. This intricate balance between biology and experience makes psychopathy a challenging phenomenon to address, both clinically and socially. Understanding these neurological and psychological roots helps demystify the mask of sanity psychopaths wear. Charming and often convincing on the surface, but fundamentally different beneath, driven by a brain that processes the world in a way that defies normal emotional connection. This knowledge is crucial because it shifts the conversation away from simply condemning evil behavior to recognizing the complex human mechanisms at play, offering a clearer path to detection, management, and perhaps prevention in the future. Every day we cross paths with hundreds of people, strangers whose faces blur instantly from memory, whose names we never learn, whose presence barely registers before fading away. Yet among these countless fleeting encounters, there are those rare individuals who leave a strange, unsettling mark on us. People whose aura is impossible to forget, whose eyes hold a coldness that freezes time, whose smiles never quite reach their gaze, and whose words, whether apologies or pleasantries, ring hollow, rehearsed like a performance perfected over years. These are the kinds of people who haunt your thoughts long after you part ways, who make you question what darkness hides behind their charming facades. We recognize these figures in movies. Hannibal Lecter, with his sinister sophistication, Tom Ripley, whose mimicry of affection hides ruthless calculation, Anton Chigurh, flipping a coin over your life, characters who embody a cold, detached kind of cruelty. But this is not just fiction. In the real world, this type of person has existed for tens of thousands of years, as the archaeological record quietly but insistently reveals. Take Cranium, 17, from Cima de los Huesos in northern Spain. A teenage girl whose skull was struck twice in the forehead with identical blows, delivered with deliberate precision. This was not an accident, nor an impulsive act of violence. It was a calculated execution, a cold act of predation. Her body was then placed deep inside a vertical shaft, hidden from view, not out of mourning, but as an act of deliberate disposal. Similar scenes play out repeatedly across time and space. At El Cedron Cave, 12 Neanderthal individuals, men, women, children, show clear signs of butchery, with cut marks indicating flesh was removed and bones broken open for marrow extraction. Yet there is no evidence of famine or survival emergency. Instead, this points to practiced, controlled violence, a chilling methodicalness that transcends mere survival instinct. At Mouly Cave in France, bones tens of thousands of years old bear similar marks of defleshing, skinning, and marrow cracking. Again, no signs of environmental crisis, only cold, calculated acts. Even in Siberia, a young girl buried with care, beads, ivory tools, and finely crafted ornaments carries the trauma of a crushing blow to the back of her skull sustained while alive, suggesting a violent act followed by an attempt at honoring her, a contradictory blend of harm and ritual. These brutal patterns extend to structures too. deep in Brunquille Cave in southern France, some 176,000 years ago, circular stone formations made of broken stalagmites were built in total darkness, far from the cave's entrance. Black residues and bone fragments found inside point to rituals requiring strength, coordination, and deliberate design, not mere survival activities, but something darker, hidden, intentional. Across continents, species, and millennia, the same traits emerge. Violence that is neither chaotic nor desperate, but cold, precise, and repeated. Victims chosen for their vulnerability, often women and children. Harm that is measured, devoid of frenzy or remorse, with perpetrators disposing of their victims silently, efficiently, and without apparent emotional burden. These ancient traces challenge us to ask, what kind of person inflicts such calculated harm again and again, yet lives among others as if nothing has happened? Psychopathy, as described by forensic psychologist Robert Hare, is less about impulsive outbursts and more about the thought process behind actions, a chilling combination of charm without empathy, guilt without consequence, a capacity for harm governed by cold calculation rather than passion or rage. The archaeological record, silent but telling, paints a picture consistent with this mindset, suggesting psychopathy is not madness but strategy, an adaptation to harsh social and environmental pressures. Evolutionary psychologist Marco Del Giudice proposes that psychopathy represents a conditional adaptation, a survival strategy deployed when coldness, detachment, and manipulation offer an advantage in a competitive, fragmented social landscape. It's not the norm, but an option that some individuals exploit successfully, ensuring their survival and reproduction even as they harm others. Ethnographic studies of the Kakung people in the Kalahari Desert, among the most egalitarian societies known, reveal subtle social games beneath their cooperative veneer. Skilled hunters downplaying their own or others' contributions to manipulate reputation, strategic gift-giving designed to bind others in obligation, and gossip used not just to enforce fairness but to weaponize social standing. These behaviors, while not psychopathy, bear an uncanny resemblance to traits of strategic charm, emotional detachment, and indirect exploitation that align with psychopathic tendencies. Across the world, similar dynamics emerge. Among the Ashaninka of Paraguay, high-status men maintain disproportionate access to shared resources and reproductive partners through alliances, charisma, and control over social narratives, escaping punishment even when freeloading. This demonstrates that even in societies designed to discourage selfishness, some individuals find ways to quietly exploit trust, working the system from within without overt force or rule breaking. In the Ice Age, these dynamics played out in small, fragile groups facing scarcity, shifting alliances, and constant pressure. Some survived by cooperating, but others survived by manipulating and exploiting cooperation itself. As human societies expanded and became more hierarchical, the psychopathic strategy did not vanish, but evolved to fit new contexts. In ancient Rome, traits once used to hoard food became tools for emperors like Caligula and Nero, whose cruel manipulations and emotional hollowness wielded unchallenged power. In medieval Europe, psychopathy cloaked itself in religious authority. Figures like Tomás de Torquemada turned torture and fear into instruments of control, sanctifying cruelty under the guise of morality. The colonial era saw psychopathy scale further, as rulers like King Leopold II outsourced violence to distant colonies, reaping profits while remaining detached from suffering. In the 20th century, this cold strategy industrialized. Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot wielded mass violence wrapped in ideology, erasing guilt both internally and externally, transforming psychopathy into state machinery. Today, this ancient strategy thrives in modern institutions, corporate boardrooms, politics, law enforcement, where charm, risk-taking, and ruthless emotional detachment bring success. Research shows psychopathic traits cluster in these arenas at rates far above the general population. These modern predators are not physically violent, but are described as charismatic, manipulative, and self-serving, rising by reading social cues, saying what leadership wants to hear, and ignoring the human cost. Their tools are contracts, layoffs, and public relations spin, not spears or swords, but the underlying strategy remains: exploiting trust and bending rules to serve themselves. Psychopathy is not a flaw or anomaly, but an enduring behavioral parasite woven into human social systems, rare enough not to topple the social order, but persistent enough to feed off it. Evolution has not eliminated this darker face of humanity. It has embedded it in the shadows of cooperation and culture. The predator never left the cave. It adapted, learned new weapons, new disguises, and mastered the art of blending in. We like to believe humanity has grown kinder and fairer over time, but evolution selects not for kindness but for what works, and sometimes what works is cruelty disguised as charm. Psychopathy is a loophole in group survival, a shadow cast by human cooperation, thriving only because most of us play by the rules and trust others to do the same. It is a rare but potent strategy that emerges when social conditions reward boldness, cunning, and detachment over empathy and fairness. From the Ice Age's fragmented tribes to today's sprawling global institutions, the predator persists, quiet, calculating, adaptable, reminding us that beneath civilization's surface, ancient echoes of cold strategy still shape the human story.